Hi, guys! Welcome to the first episode of the Funsmith Fireside Chats. I'm your host, Ariana Isbell, a recent grad and aspiring game designer. Today we are joined by my co-host, Alex Brazie, an award-winning game developer, as well as special guest David Zheng, the behind-the-scenes co-founder of Game Design Skills. He's a growth marketing strategist and an avid self-learner who has acquired a wide range of skills during his entrepreneurial career. In this episode, we'll be discussing how to get your foot in the door in the gaming industry. By the way, if you enjoy this episode, please like and subscribe for more advice from design pros to help you on your game design journey. Oh, and of course, feel free to comment below if you have any questions at all, and me, Alex, and David will be more than happy to answer them. Enjoy!
All right.
Hey, guys!
Hey, how's it going?
What's up?
It's good. How are you doing today?
I'm having a wonderful day. It's a beautiful view outside. The sky is blue and clear. It's like you have spring every day of the year.
That's nice, but it's very hot.
Yeah.
That is quite a bit hot, yeah.
How many degrees is it?
I think it's 25 degrees here right now.
Degrees?
Maybe 26.
26?
Which is like 80
That's
for
interesting.
Americans.
Yeah. It's so interesting. Alex is using Celsius. I'm so not used to it because I went to Bali and Mexico, so it's super hot here. And then when people, I'm so used to using Fahrenheit. When people start using Celsius, I'm like, I don't reference how hot it is.
It's probably, if you're in Mexico, if you're in Bali right now, it's probably 36 or 37, right?
I don't know. I'm in Mexico right now. So Mexico is close to Bali. Right now it's like 28, 29, like pretty hot.
Oh,
yeah,
I think like 38, 39 is over 120 degrees. I think that's that's like really hot. That's like 30. Record temperature hot.
Yeah.
So 30 is about 80 degrees. So basically the way to do it is 32 times double the number is like the rough way of doing it. So 30, 60 plus 32 would be just 90, 92.
Okay, got it. Well, that's why you're the math guy.
Yeah.
It is. That's why they pay me for the math.
Yeah.
Yeah, you get paid for the maths, I get paid for the arts.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Well, I don't get paid yet.
And David is the one who pays us. So clearly we're doing something right here.
Yeah, thanks, David, for the paying. But that actually leads really well into my questions for you guys today. Because I'm trying to get more paid than I am right now.
Okay. We'll pay you an extra $1 an episode. No problem.
No, not for the podcast. But as a developer, I am trying to get paid more as a game designer. And you guys are game designers, like elder game designers. So I have questions for you as a baby game designer.
All right. Well, why don't you go ahead and lead into your questions. Where do you want to start?
Well, I mean, first of all, this is pretty broad, but just like how to get a job, but more specifically, when I've been applying for things, I feel like it's a lottery and it's just sort of, can you get people's attention? Can you get them to pay attention to you? So if you've ever been involved in hiring or when you were applying for jobs, what did you do that got the interviewer's attention so that you could get your foot in the door and actually talk to them?
Yeah, so I've been more on the hiring side in the last couple decades. And I'm going to say there's like several things you can do to really get right. Number one, let's just start from the beginning, right? Make sure you're applying for jobs that either interest you at some level or are going to teach you something. Now that means really early on in your career, right? That can be just about any job. If you're getting started in the industry, the first job is going to get you in the door. So don't be too, stingy on where you apply. The second is really make sure you customize your CV, that cover letter, to basically show that you have the type of skills that that company is looking for in whatever game it is. For example, what are some of the jobs you've applied to so far?
Character designer, narrative designer, prop designer, environment designer.
Okay, well, let's stop right there, right? So for right there, you have 5 completely different skill sets that you're applying for there, right? Yeah. Environment design, right, is often 3D modeling. Character design is almost about 2D concept images. Whereas like narrative design is about writing and contextualization, whereas like gameplay design is all about, mechanics, and combat design is all about animations and timing, right? So you also need to kind of narrow in on where your current place of power is, right? You need to be going for the type of roles that really call to and inspire you, and that you've done enough work on your own time or in your own projects to showcase that you've been building up towards that role.
Got it.
So
Okay.
thinking through those five, which of those five is the strongest for you?
Probably character design. I do a lot of illustrations, and I have been commissioned by like individuals to do concept art for their characters, so that's where I'm most comfortable.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and do a little exercise on character design then.
Oh, okay.
All right. So I'm going to be a client, and I'm going to ask you for basically to tell you an idea for a character, and want you to kind of reflect back to me the kind of questions you would ask to get more information out of the client to produce the type of character they're actually looking for.
Oh, okay.
All right. Okay.
Let's go.
All right. So, hey, man, I really want this super powerful character. She's gonna have a massive weapon, and she's gonna have blades everywhere, and be really fast. And I just think this is gonna be a really awesome character. What are your thoughts on this? But when can you start drawing her?
Okay, that's first of all, great concept. I have a couple questions. First of all, I want to know what kind of setting are we in? So is this a sci-fi setting, a fantasy setting? What are you thinking about?
Oh, I'm thinking definitely sci-fi, like maybe a little bit of gothic inspiration there, a little bit
Mm-hmm.
of like those harsh shapes in the buildings, but very much sci-fi, future.
Okay, maybe a little bit steampunk?
I would say steampunk is too bright, too colorful. I
Mm-hmm.
want this to be more of a clean, modern look, but with the
Mm-hmm.
harsh shapes, more like kind of those gothic, vampire type of street buildings. Like, imagine that the designer of the cathedrals came to the modern era and was building everything out of glass now.
Got it. Well, that sounds beautiful. Um, so in that case, this is a
hmm
pretty developed society. Is it an overall happy society? Is it kind of dystopian? Can you tell me more about where she lives and also specifically what her lifestyle is like?
Oh, interesting. Well, she's kind of a murderous assassin type, but in a world where most people think things are very peaceful. So she
Hmm.
has to keep up this very sophisticated business look most of the time. But I think that when she goes into, infiltration, think sort of like, what do you call it? Kind of Jane Bond, and but with sci tech infiltration. But she's fighting through robots and all of these crazy creatures that are, the experiments of large corporations as she's going in to either steal the research or defeat them.
Got
Um,
it. Okay, so maybe she should have kind of two looks. We can have her civilian look when she's disguised to
mhm.
represent the spy side, and then also a combat look where she's got more of her weapons and things like that out. Does that sound good to you?
Yeah, definitely. And I'm thinking like a mecha look on that character too,
Mecha.
right?
Okay,
Like
so
what, but only when she's in battle mode. Like it's almost like she's augmented with glass and porcelain machinery, right? To really sell that sort of shape and style.
yes, definitely. I'm definitely getting a vision for what you want. So on one side we have kind of an avant-garde, futuristic Bond super spy look, and then on the other side we've got a mecha look. What color scheme are you imagining for her?
Oh man, that's a great question. I haven't really thought through that yet. But considering that I want this very modern shaped, crafty future, like have you seen those pictures of the modern structures that are like very organic and twisted? They're all made out
Mm-hmm.
of white. I've forgotten the architect's name. I want it to look like that, so I'm
Mm-hmm.
imagining like whites and porcelain on top of like dark business suit underneath that creates that contrast.
Got it. So we've got mostly earth tones. They're neutrals, sort of monochromatic.
Yes, for
Okay.
her. The rest of the world can be more colorful and advertising, but she's not.
Yeah, I mean, she seems like a bit more of a character with an angsty backstory. So darker
Yeah,
colors
for
to represent that personality. And then just like as far as age, ethnic background, things like that. Does she have any distinguishing markings that you were
hmm.
imagining?
I haven't thought that through yet. How would you propose we come up with an answer for that?
I can just produce iterations for you.
hmm
I can make different versions. If I were to give you my recommendation, I would say that it's important to think about the characters that are already existing and sort of oversaturating the market with their
hmm
look, and then potentially try to choose traits of characters that are underrepresented in games. Because that will, for one thing, make her more unique, and then also cause people who might identify with that character to be more drawn to your title.
All right. Well, that sounds like a good start. Okay, let's
Yeah.
pause there. Okay, so you did a bunch of things that worked really well there, right? You went in and kind of elicited what I was looking for. You found out what the context of the world is. you drew in a lot of the elements that were made a lot of sense to the narrative design of the world itself. Places where you missed kind of the mark there, where you didn't ask like what is her place of power, right? What kind of style of combat does she do? Does she fight at all? Is she hand to hand, and thus the augmentations of the suit are like fisticuff stuff, or is it more like lasers and energy? Then the question like what type of challenges would she face, right? And that would kind of like help inform you what type of stuff beyond just the character's look to what is the character's function, like that. So I would say that that's probably a great area to go. Is what is the character's function? What are her special moves?
Yeah.
What are her powers? What are her opponents? Right.
That really makes sense.
So
I should have been thinking not just.
Yeah. Sorry.
Go ahead, David.
My bad. So what it looks like to me is like it's almost like for people who are new to get into design, they think too visually, only on the visual stuff, less on the functional like mechanics or whatever. Right. I think that's what you're pointing out. Right?
Well, but I mean that's natural for someone getting started who's focused heavily on visual design, right? And then naturally you're thinking about the representation of the character. But you're correct that the other layer to it is the function of the character, especially in video games. If you're doing comics, for example, you might just want to know what is one of her two of her powers, and you'd start making outfits. But even then, right, you really want to go to the function of the character, the challenges, the opposition to the character as well will help inform it. Batman being dark and the Joker being pale-faced and colorful, right, is an intentional like a juxtaposition, right, of these contrasting characters. So that's like one example of like how you might improve your skill set when you're doing pitches for character design.
Yeah.
And so and not to of course to bash on you at all. It's just like, hey, like these are the type of questions where I'd be like, hey, have you thought through this bit?
Yeah. No, I don't take that as being bashed at all. I actually think that's incredibly useful because I've gotten a lot of feedback to the point where I sort of hear the same things over and over, and I've never heard that. And I mean, it totally makes sense because you are a mechanics guy. You think about game design and the gameplay. And I should have thought about that. So, like, that's amazing. I'm going to think about that now.
All right. Well, that's great, right? Because there's all these different, here's the thing is, no matter how long you've been in this industry, there's always places to be improving.
Yeah.
I'm strong on mechanics and systems and a little weaker in animation and pretty not so great at VFX work, right? It's just that's not where I've invested a lot of time and energy.
Yeah.
So by partnering with people who think that way and do go into those spaces regularly, you can often offset or even build a better product by having people work in their greatest place of strength.
Yeah.
And so I think that's probably a huge piece of advice going anywhere, right? David, for example, when you're doing, production and marketing and business stuff, how do you find a slot for yourself within the teams that you're in?
First of all, I want to see I will say where's my interest. That matters a lot more. If I like to look at things more fundamentally, because whatever I'm interested in. For example, how I got started in marketing is I started as an intern. So I interned for Andrew Finn and Tim Urban. Tim Urban was the writer of A Wig But Why, which just became a viral blog.
I love that podcast. It's one of my favorites.
But when I first started, he didn't have the blog. He was just their co-founders of a tutoring company. I have zero experience. So what got me interested is I got introduced to search engine optimization. So I started reading a lot of blog posts about it. So I know a lot of theories. Like I'll sit there for hours just reading it because I'm just interested in it.
Sorry to interrupt you. Job optimization? Is that what you said?
No, search engine optimization. So basically,
engine optimization.
So search engine, like for Google, like for example, you want to get your website ranked on top because majority of the clicks is on like for example, top more than 50% of the traffic goes to the first search. Then it tapers down exponentially. Then nobody goes to page 2, right? Very rare people. There's a joke in the SEO community is like, page 2 is where you go hide dead bodies because nobody ever checks. So
that's so true. That's so true. So, that's really funny.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a game concept in there where you're hiding search results to cover up the evidence.
Yeah. They have those.
Some sort of international sci-fi future, right?
They have those called reputation management. So let's say you get some site like talk bad about you. It got ranked when they Google your name. They could pay people to you have to figure out how to remove the ranking.
Move you to page 2.
Yeah, to page 2 or down closer, or just remove it from this. Get the index. But when I got into it, because I had the interest, I'm able to turn the founders into my client. And then even though I didn't have a lot of practical knowledge, actually implementing it theoretically, I know how to do a lot of those things. So I think interest is more important, because the thing is, I believe that if you're interested in something, you're going to do it much better, and then you can work longer. You can be more obsessed about it, and guess what? To you, it's fun. So how is someone going to compete with you if that's not fun to them? That's not interesting to them. So I think that, and on the most fundamental level, I believe that like that's the most important thing. Once you do that, just go with it and start nerd out on it, right? And then once you nerd out on it enough, then now when you go, and people could tell when you talk, but the second thing is basically ability to communicate that, right? And then once you talk, and they're gonna understand that you're able to do it, right? So I think that's the most important thing I aim for, what I'm interested in.
Yeah, and a lot of game design is communication, right?
Yep.
I mean, think about when you're pitching your ideas and your own concepts, whether it's in class or to a application, right? Your ability to communicate, whether it's visual, written, or art over the voice to voice, it kind of defines how people interpret your own ideas.
Yeah.
Okay, I do want to bring something up though. You guys have both talked about speaking to human beings, which obviously there's still things I can improve on, but I feel like overall is something that I'm pretty strong at. But what I've been running into with the application process is just that so much of it these days is automated. And I mean, there's even like hiring softwares that go through all of the resumes and all of the cover letters and just filter out for keywords. And it's anybody's guess what the keywords are. You can do your best to try and figure out from the company's mission statement and things like that what it might be. But with all of that automation, I feel like it's really hard to get anybody's attention who's a real human being. And like, for example, I recently saw this Facebook post, and it was about this guy who pretended to be a Uber Eats delivery guy, and he brought donuts, and then on the inside of the box, he taped his resume, and he was like, if you like these donuts, consider me, which I'm not sure about the ethics of that. And I've thought about doing it, but then I'm like, oh God, but if I do that, are they just going to hate me? Are they going to be like, that was really unprofessional? So,
well, it's difficult, right? Because it really depends on catering to the audience. Some people are very, like aggressive and, like putting yourself out there tactics. Others have very procedural organizations like the big three, right? Like EA and so on. It doesn't matter how you get the application there, they're just going to pull the resume off and either put it in the machine or not. And, unfortunately, a lot of it does come, like what you're saying there is right. It is about relationships ultimately and who will vouch for you early on, which comes down to a lot of socializing and a lot of networking, things that are incredibly hard to do in times like this. In fact, one of the best networks you can actually be building is the community you are going through college with, right? The other students who you worked on projects with, how they developed things, and staying in touch. I can't count on one hand the number of opportunities that come my way due to previous people I've worked with or other people I've known in the past, just like happen to think, oh, hey, you do things that are in this space. Let me send an email and just say, hey, are you interested in it? Or, hey, talk to this person, they'll connect you to someone else. But, that unfortunately is kind of like something you get after a year or two in the industry as you get exposed to people and you're working through things. And that first few steps are incredibly hard. That's why, you actually can't really rely on the resume itself. The resume itself just proves how much work you already have. It's really kind of LinkedIn fodder, right? It's actually the portfolio, right? When someone, like, they look at your resume, they just do a cursory check. Have you worked in the industry before? Yes, no. Okay, what work have you done that's close to the stuff in the industry? And then they go straight to your portfolio. Then they look at how analytical are you if you're going for an analytical role. They look at the style of art. They look at hey, have you submitted samples with your application that match the style of the games that we're making or trying to make? With narrative design, it's particularly tough because no one's going to read a big block of text. They might look at one paragraph and just be like, hey, how do they present this?
They don't have time to read everybody's like 300-page book.
And that's why all of those little details, tend to add up so much early on in the career. But here's the thing, if you're building portfolio items, and this can't just be your homework from college, right? It can't just be something you were working on already. It has to be something you did with an intent, a goal, and then a breakdown of the outcome and how you would improve it if you approached it again next time. Because those are the type of skills someone's really looking for, right? Not just where are you, but how do you analyze, break down, and improve yourself as well. That makes you a better bet for someone who is taking a chance on you early on in your career.
That's interesting. I have some thoughts on that. So it almost looked like the whole process of getting to the gaming industry, basically get a job, is almost like there's different skill sets you have to learn. Like for example, having the ability to the competency for the role is one of them. Competence and potential, I would say both, right? So, and then the next thing is how do you get noticed, attention? So, the idea where with the donuts, yeah, that's actually pretty smart because if you think about it, you're fighting for attention. In a way, you're advertising. So, I'm in the advertising industry. What do? You fight for attention on Facebook or on Google, whatever you do. You're bidding for people's attention, the attention economy. So, it's the same way when you're trying to, I think, when you apply, how do you get their attention? There's no fair game. Either you do. That means, basically in advertising, they call it first movers advantage or early movers advantage. So the way it works is the thing that's more unique, you're the one who came up with it, you're gonna get lion's shares of the benefit. But more people copy the strategy because we're adaptable creatures. So what happens? The people who are looking at it, they start seeing the same tactics over and over by different companies. They become less and less effective because you start understanding the patterns. So I think it's the same way. So in a way, that's very smart because there's no fair game or not fair game. It basically either works or it isn't. Unless you're not cheating somebody out of their you're not doing them malice to someone. I believe, right? So
yeah.
So,
as long as you're not like specifically trying to hurt somebody else, it's not unethical.
And also a very important thing that Alex was talking about is basically portfolio. That's actually something I'm really a huge believer in. That's something, if you think about our current society, what we do is we go to college and then we get a degree, or you take some online class. What they give you? They give you a certificate. What's the point of a certificate or a degree or piece of paper? What does it imply? It implies that you might know how to do something, right? So, but it's an industrial cookie cutter way to mass produce it. And that's the only way you could do it because it takes a lot more time to build a portfolio and everyone has their own individual traits and skills. But what does a portfolio do? It proves that you can do something because this is what you have done, right? So it's way better, right? So it speaks louder than a piece of paper. And then especially in the game design, right? So my follow-up question to your question to Alex is, if you were to, it sounds like a multivariable problem, how to get into the industry. So you were to have a high-level picture of all the problems you have to overcome to get your first job from not having the job. What would you say there would be if you were to compile all the little hurdles you have to hop over?
All the problems.
Yeah.
I feel like probably my biggest problem is the amount of mass that I have in my portfolio. I have a lot of illustration work. I have a fair amount of 3D modeling design, but I don't really have any examples of more expansive projects that have been completed. And that's something that I'm trying to rectify. Yeah. I do have a couple of friends that I'm working on a game with, but it's pretty difficult to actually try and complete something from start to finish, as I'm sure that you guys know. And trying to do it on your own versus trying to do it with other people, those both have their own challenges, because when you're by yourself, you don't have anybody to be accountable to, and you're not necessarily motivated. But then when you're working with other people, you always have to get on them to do their parts. So yeah, there's stuff that I've been trying to do to pad out my portfolio and make it look a little more impressive, but it takes time. And so I do worry that even though I think I have quality work in my portfolio, that maybe it's not enough.
Well, I mean, one of the advantages you have actually bringing up here is that there are a lot of different pieces of design you can get involved with and showcase. Like, again, you want to have one area where you're very strong. Your case might be visual design. But then you want a secondary component, like, hey, you can integrate some of that at a technical level. And that may not mean that you're a programmer, but it means that you can actually go through the steps of setting up shaders or making motion graphics, right, for your stuff, or understand how to rig 2D art in something like Spine, or even setting up simple scripting language stuff in Stencil to prove out the concepts behind your ideas. There's also an entire category of games beyond just raw video games as well. Like, obviously that may be your best case if you're looking to get directly into the industry. But you can also showcase design skills around simpler games, card games, board games, even concepts for like playground games and things like that. Really simple stuff that you showcase that you have thought through how people interact with each other, and then utilize your skills to communicate those concepts, ideas, and so on in a more effective way.
Interesting. Okay, so if I were to design something like that, like a card game or a board game or a playground game, how do I go about showcasing that on my website portfolio in such a way that it demonstrates that I have those skills? Would it be best to have like a video, or like what would you say?
All right, so I think you need to have several pieces there. Obviously, there's so many different ways of approaching portfolios. Some of the best, and I'm going to actually quote Joseph Sopko's blog here. He just did an amazing portfolio, which just took a bunch of very small ideas and then showcased with like 10, 20-second video of the most interesting part of the stuff, right? And even if you didn't click on that to watch it, then he had like an image showing a basic interaction within the game, and then a visual representation of the general flow, and then some blocks of text underneath that you could just read through to kind of go through and get into, oh, what is his thinking there? And he broke it really down nicely into, here are the goals, here's what I did, here's where I stopped, and here's what I would go back to and approve it next time. And for example, in the case of visual direction, you actually, it's actually one of the most challenging because even though there's a lot of demand for visual art, right, it also wants to be incredibly high quality. You need to showcase both composition skills and rendering and, all of these different, general ideas for how to concept characters and parts and make sure the world fits together, right? Because there's so many people doing that, there's such a high bar for what good is. Whereas when it comes to like documentation, mechanics design, systems design, more people shy away from that stuff. I actually want to go back to your original point, which was math, right? And I think the question is it math that's challenging, or is it the expression of the general idea you're trying to get across and math is getting in the way, right? For example, if we need to make a power system, right? Let's take something as simple as war. Every card literally just has one value, its attack value, and that's, ace is 1, 2 is 2, 3 is 3, all the way up to the face cards, which are 10, right? Then, we have a very simple rule, which is communicated in a visual way, but the math itself for playing the game isn't that hard. Bigger number wins, ties, you keep going, right? So, I really think the question is it math that you struggle with? Is it expressing things technically that you're struggling with? Or is it the idea that you need to be able to demonstrate you can set things up inside a technical environment? For example, I would consider you equally technical if you could take a bunch of different textures and concepts you came up with, run them through a series of shaders, and make something very visually impressive inside a game environment, right? Like that is also an incredibly technical chain of actions, even though you did no programming on your own.
Got it. I see. Well, yeah, technical math is really not so much of an issue for me. I joke about it. I'm not good at math, like when it's on the spot and I am pressured, because then my brain freezes up from the like post-traumatic anxiety of high school calculus. But technical math, where it's just practical stuff, is really not too much of an issue for me. Coding doesn't come naturally to me. I can kind of figure it out, like basic coding. So yeah, I'm able to do it, especially when it comes to stuff like shaders. It's just, there's a limit. There's like a limit to my abilities with that.
Yeah. Well, just like any limit, right? It's a matter of facing up against it and pushing against it. It sounds like if you actually are doing okay with shaders and lighting and the artwork, another space to go into is actually looking at things like VFX development, right? It takes a really good sense of gameplay brain combined with visual capabilities to make really good VFX. And that's not just, you think about how does the motion of the particle or the effect convey the gameplay intent of the game design itself, right? And again, this may not be your vision per se, Ari, but it's more like just want people listening to be thinking through the other spaces that are art adjacent that are actually in incredibly high demand. Like there's a massive demand for VFX artists. They're just in incredibly short supply because there's just enough technical tools in the way of making a really cool, fireball. At the end of the day, that's what often they are: fireball, ground effects, eruptions.
Yeah.
People hesitate on it, but it's actually more or less putting things in there, being okay with messing around with sliders, it not quite being right, and just keep tweaking and twisting, which is what you do when you're painting a picture as well.
Yeah.
Just with a different brush.
I see what you're saying. Okay, well then, that brings me to something else, which is a lot of these softwares that you use to be able to practice these skills are very expensive. And all my licenses from college are running out of time. So obviously Blender is a good free resource for people, but it's not going to make a game. You can use Blender to model and to practice with lighting and effects and all sorts of things like that. But as far as tools to practice game design, maybe for individuals who didn't focus on that but want to be able to try to create something simple to demonstrate what they can do. Do you have any recommendations? We've talked before about Twine, which I thought was fantastic.
Yeah, if you want to like work on narrative design or carrying something through, let's say, a story space, Twine is great. You literally just need to be able to open a text editor, follow the instructions, and you can basically create a choose your own adventure game, which on its own may not seem impressive, but when you sit there and you really think about what you're doing, establishing context, giving players decisions, and then rewarding them for the decisions they make by having them called back upon later on in the game, you're actually hitting a lot of the notes for all the advanced things that really expensive high-tier games do as well. It's just you're doing it with text instead of with models and voiceover. There's actually some other tools I want to recommend. You could, for example, if you want to work with like 3D art or really simple 3D art, you can go over to things like kenny.nl. That's KENNEY.nl. And you can actually like draw like pixel art that is the silhouette of the shape you want. Type in some numbers for how high you want the piece to be, and it'll actually generate 3D models for you from very simple 16 by 16 or 32 by 32, images. And that'll give you assets to start prototyping with. Also, obviously, Unity is free. It's pretty complicated, right, at a high level if you're trying to like make an entire game. But if you're just trying to demonstrate one skill, and again, I think that's kind of the thing. It's like, when you're learning martial art or sport, right, you learn that one move over and over and over again. Going in and actually working and just trying to like take something you've seen and recreating it, like inside Unity using, for example, Shuriken, which is completely free. I think you can actually buy a couple of other particle expansion packs for a very small amount of money with tons of examples in them to get you started, right?
Sorry to interrupt. You said Shuriken. What does Shuriken do?
Oh, Shuriken is the free particle system included with Unity.
Okay.
Now, it's not the highest, fanciest thing, but you can get started with it. And the concepts you'll learn there, emission of particles, what are their textures, what colors are on it, are the same things you find everywhere. It doesn't matter whether you work at a Riot or a Blizzard or working in Unreal, right? Those concepts are the same thing. Also, Unreal, right, also has a phenomenal community around, their VFX stack. And again, you don't even have to prove out an entire game necessarily to showcase you're capable of building one interesting thing or selling it really well. I'm actually reminded of this really amazing video, and I'm sure we'll put a link to it in the comments, of this guy who went through and just played a bunch of games and said, what is my favorite thing from this game? And it would be like the freeze axe from God of War, or the zoom in laser sight from a couple of FPS games. And he would just sit down and he would just recreate that in a game engine. Just get the visuals, the framing, the timing, all of the sound effects, right? And just recreate that in a little sequence he could play inside Unity or Unreal or whatever art tool it is to showcase that he understood all of those little bits that came together to create a really satisfying moment and experience.
Okay, so can you then, if you've replicated somebody else's work, it's plagiarism unless you cite them, but can you post it on your website and say, look, this wasn't my original idea, but I made it, I copied it, I have the skills to do that. Can you share that and basically say like...
You can even, because of fair use law, you can actually do side by sides. You can say, this is the original, here's my redo of it, and people can see like, oh, holy shit, this was done by $1 million, salaried VFX team, and this was me working for a month or two on one effect.
Yeah.
You can be like, oh, wow, we get like 80% of the way there. This guy is incredible already, right?
Yeah.
Oh, and I have, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
So I have a thought on that too. This is something we do in business to business businesses, because what we need to do when we sell to other businesses is show case studies. So as we're like doing campaigns for marketing, for example, we'll document it. So basically, it might be a good process for you to document. It's almost like working out, tracking, document your weight gains, your nutrition, etc. So I think as you're doing this, what Alex is saying, I think it might be a good idea to adapt this principle and document the process, and then you can narrate after you show the end result. You're like, here's how I did it, blah 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 blah, and you need to make sure you take screenshots and capture it. So you show them different stage of how, and that proves that you've done it, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and that you personally have done it and understand the challenges. Because a lot of what I did in hiring was actually screen out the people who were faking it or were on the team with the guy who did the work.
Oh,
right?
Really?
Yeah.
I wouldn't have expected that. That was something that you were encountering often?
quite often. Either people who had like watched a GDC video and tried to pretend that they had worked on it,
Yeah.
or maybe they had like had lunchroom conversations with someone who worked on it,
Yeah.
and that's what they wanted to do, but they hadn't done the execution themselves, right?
Wow.
And so you just kind of need to dig in and really get to know who are the people who've really done something. Like, for example, someone who's gotten 70% of the way there and have really done the work is more useful and valuable than someone who understands the 70 to 80% part but has never done that lead up work that gets you there.
Wait, how do you
Yeah,
know?
that's-
How do you know? How do you know someone? Like, what are the giveaways? I'm sorry, I'm really.
Oh yeah. When you dig into details on how they go into how they solve the problem, they can talk about a specific nuance they personally struggled with, and they'll give multiple variations of different solutions they tried along the way and why they failed. The person who only can explain the end result is a person who was only there at the surface. That's the big one.
It's like high
They
school.
didn't take any of the other journey.
You know when you copy someone's homework, you're like you didn't know the answers.
I didn't copy people's homework. I should have. It would have been way more efficient than the time I wasted, but I didn't.
Funny how that works, right? In real life, and it really sometimes mirrors the classroom sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think there's a strong example of where things don't mirror the classroom is working on a team is incredibly valuable. If 3 people sit down and they copy the shit out of like God of War, like one attack of God of War, I don't care that they work together. In fact, I'm encouraged by that, right? Whereas traditional education is all about what can you personally do. Let's not let you cheat. Let's not focus on you working together.
Yeah.
But people are interdependent. They work together on a team, and that's where the value comes from.
Got it.
Yeah.
I have some follow-up.
What were some?
Oh, sorry, go ahead. My bad.
Now, what were some great team experiences you had in college and on your team projects now, Ari?
I'm sorry. I think David was just about to say something on that subject, and I wanted to let him speak because we've been talking a lot. I'll answer your question, I promise. But what were you gonna say, David?
Yeah, can you hold that thought, Alex? Because this is also about the portfolio. I think what your question is, I think earlier when you talked about the portfolio, I just want to clarify. What you're actually asking is like, how do you get into how do you basically start stacking experiences with your portfolio it out where it looks like from beginning to end? I guess the question for you, Alex, to follow up to that is how do you what are, if you were to list X amount of ways to do these kind of things, what would they be that someone could access today pretty easily? Because based on for those of you who don't know your background, later I would love you to share it, but how you got into it starting with modding, right? So modding is another way of practicing.
Yeah.
So what are different ways you could do this and demonstrate this? Because that's one. Another one would say like game jams, right? Or something like, so can you give some more, give people a list of ideas where they could do this?
All right. Well, let me start from, you've actually asked like 4 questions there.
Yeah.
So let me see if I can unpack them.
Yeah.
The first thing is I did start out as a modder, right?
Yeah.
People already had things that worked, and I tweaked a piece of it and then saw my changes go in effect within the experience.
Yeah.
And I think that's actually a fantastic way to start because it gets you to results as fast as possible and creates a positive momentum spike, gives you a sense of, holy shit, I can do this. For example, making things like StarCraft 2 or Warcraft Original mods was great because you had all these assets, you had all of this working code, you just needed to tell the game to do what you wanted to do in your head, and then you saw how it played out and you iterated and iterated and iterated. Even something, for example, as simple as taking the dragon out of Skyrim and replacing it with a prefabricated model of Thomas the Tank Engine is actually a fantastic starting point, right? It's a showcasing that you understand how games are made, how the components work together, and that you are willing to go in, make a mess, and learn what happens and all the pieces that go missing when you start changing up the mix, right? Because I believe that that's kind of the first one, is breaking down things that exist, right? That's the step number 1. Step number 2 is trying to kind of tweak it, just change something a little bit so you can start to see results and see how your decisions are influencing the final experience. Then you want to actually start crafting. You want to try to recreate this experience that you've had, right? Start to finish with something new, or maybe with some mildly unique idea, but in the same context you had before. Then you start taking, okay, well, let me start mixing something new in from other games. Again, you're not going for original ideas yet. And then finally, after you have all this context, now I understand what concrete skills I need to have. Now I understand the consequences of breaking things. And I've actually tried assembling pieces of things that didn't fit together and learned where they mismatch. Now you're kind of built up to start making your own ideas.
Okay.
And then you put all of that on your portfolio and you talk about it and you tell them what you struggled with and you show them all of the pieces in the finished product, and then that's the thing that's really going to get their attention.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, each of their stages showcases a different level of development. Someone who's hit stage 5 here is really capable because they're already ready to make something. But even someone on stage 2 or 3, at least is showcasing that's the right type of thinking, that they're caring about the right parts, and that they're working on skill development.
And I think a soft skill that two few soft skills that also applies, and what you're trying to build a portfolio is a content creation. So basically, it's your ability to blog, right? Because for example, for me, what I did like a lot to get clients when I'm in the marketing industry is I wrote a marketing, like I already like 6,000, 9,000 worth like blogs. I write it in everything. I show them exactly how I did. I screenshot everything, make it very digestible, and then from there, people after they read it, and most of them they're not gonna do it themselves, and then like, oh, yeah, I ain't doing this, but this guy sounds like he knows what he's doing. Then they'll start contacting me. So, but blogging is a whole skill set. On top of that, also, if you're blogging is your thing, like writing, vlogging, right? Like talk about it and share, like be able to kind of use YouTube to learn to video edit a little, piece it together.
Yeah.
We actually have someone from our game jam, who's able to, who basically did a video of how they put the game together. I think it's great. Maybe later in edit, you could probably put it there and show it real quick. I'll send you the video. But these are different ways, right? So it's almost like a soft skill that no one ever think about. Because the moment you start creating portfolio, you become a content creator, right? So now you're like, oh shit, this is what I do. So it's ability to demonstrate that, right? So that's just a thought I want to share. Yeah.
Well, here's a little bit of a secret, but this is that for me. This that we're doing. I'm trying to.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
No way.
So if you're hiring and you need somebody to draw things for you or to model things for you, self-insert advertisement right here.
Sure.
It's just gonna be a large ad, like a billboard. Hire Ariana Isbell right now. 888-321-123.
Exactly.
Highly recommended.
Oh, thank you guys. That's very sweet. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
But yes.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. Sorry, I got a blank. I was gonna say I was gonna follow up with Alex's question. Yeah. Would you ask earlier? My bad.
Oh yeah, I was gonna bring that up too.
Yeah,
you asked me about group projects and what my experience with group projects was in college.
Yep.
We didn't really do any. Barely.
Are you serious?
Yeah, barely at all. So there was a class. There was a class called group projects, and that class was a bit tough to get into, and it wasn't required. And there was other stuff that I thought was more valuable at the time, like specific skills that I was trying to develop. So I never took it. And outside of that, most of our classes were individual work. Every once in a while, we would do exercises that involved multiple people, but very rarely was anything significant dependent on others. So my experience with group projects is pretty limited to post-college stuff, just with things that I'm doing with my friends currently, but we don't know what we're doing. So.
Well, that's and that's like some example where I had a nice advantage, right? Was that I was taking CS major, right, which is useful on its own. But one of my most valuable classes was actually software engineering, which is actually about all of the supporting stuff besides the coding. And we had to make I kid you not, a bowling simulator, right? Not a simulator of the bowling physics, a simulator of a bowling alley and the display of someone putting in various scores and pins and things like that. And the activity was not the CS challenge, which is very basic. Take this, represent this, add the score together, implement the rules. It was actually how we divided up the work, how we worked with each other, who followed through, and how we held people accountable on that teamwork, keeping in mind that at the end of the day, we just had to finish this project, which is a softball on its own, and document the steps and how we did it. It turns out those are incredibly useful skills, whether you're an individual content creator or a developer, because understanding how everyone else comes together and these interdependencies between the steps is an incredibly important thing. For example, Ari, as you work through your own projects, you'll realize, hey, I want to put a character in the world. What do I do before I have a model and animation? Well, in your case, you might be empowered to make those. But what if the logic isn't ready yet? How do you simulate that? How do you test it out in a way that confirms that your asset will work? Or, for example, as you're building gameplay, well, maybe you don't have feedback. So what do? Do you just put floating numbers on screen to showcase health and and things like that? All of a sudden you realize there's all of these pieces, or each individual piece might take a day. The whole thing might take a week, so it takes one day, communicate with another person for half a day, start day 2 of work, day 3 of work, oh, we got to fix bugs, and then you're on day 5, you know?
Yeah. That definitely seems like it would have been helpful. And it's stuff that I'm learning now, so it's never too late, but it does make me wish that I took that group projects class.
Yeah. In fact, there's a school out of UC Florida that actually invited me as a speaker out there.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the amazing things they do, they have this concept of the cohort. And these are students who work together for almost 2 years throughout the entire experience. They're in the same classes together, they're taught the same things. And so they have to build these 10 to 20 person teams and execute on a project every 6 months together. And so over the course of 3 years of this college, they actually go through the process of game development 3 times for, building what they call these capstone projects. And these can be,
That gave me an idea, which I don't know if any schools do this, but I think it would be really cool if they would pair up the arts and animation students with the CS students and put them together so that they could work together. Because part of the problem for me is that most of my friends are also visual artists.
Yep.
And so I'm like, I drew a picture, and they're like, I drew a picture, and then we have no code. So
that's a great example of communities that you can join actually online. For example, there's Discords for things like the International Game Developers Association. My friends Renee and Mika are actually the co-presidents of this organization. And they host communities for people who are of diverse skill sets and want to get into game development to meet others who are outside of their skill set. So meet other engineers and producers and artists and so on who are also interested in that space. You can network with them online, and it's completely free to join and hang out with them.
That's cool. You got to invite me to that.
All right, well, let's get you to the Discord.
Awesome.
You know what's funny about this? This is very, you know how you guys, this is the same problem in the startup community, because coders are always in demand. When people go in, the marketers and stuff, like, they always have like an access to them, and then everybody goes to a hackathon, which is basically game jam but for startups. But everybody's trying to look for the developer because it's a high leverage skill, right? So it's interesting.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
Yeah. Oh, and then also your point that Alex is really interesting is that basically you have to have awareness of you have to learn how to be collaborative, right? That's a very important skill, because that's something that actually got me better. Basically, in a way, fundamentally, if you look at it, it's like game theory, right? When do you play a zero-sum game? When you don't? So a lot of times we get roped into competitions unconsciously. Peter Thiel, the guy who founded with Elon Musk PayPal, one of the first VCs who funded Facebook, right? He says like. He talked about his regrets of what he got roped into competitions. He basically said we're taught to be very competitive. We're competitive animals, but we get roped into competitions with no stakes, right? For status, right? So a lot of times, I think you just by being conscious and aware of that, you just become naturally more collaborative, right? Instead of
you used the term zero-sum game.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
So zero-sum games, like for example, when you get into a team, you start competing with your teammate. So now instead of collaborating, you want to win, but you don't really win. You win by collaborating. So, like for example, in game theory, where they talk about prisoner's dilemma, it's the same thing, right? Mm-hmm. So when the two prisoners, let's say you and your friend, let's say me and Alex, we got caught, right, doing something. We're waiting to interrogation rooms, right? So right now, basically. The police doesn't have informational leverage over us. They don't know what happened, have no proof. The only way they could do that is getting one of us to play zero-sum game with the other person, turn on the other person. But if we collaborate, we don't say anything, we have the leverage. But if we actually turn the other person in, we'll just lose our own leverage. Because the moment you give the information, you're screwed. They can do whatever to you. So that's an example of when you collaborate, you actually win. Instead of playing zero-sum game, you both lose, right?
Yeah, I see.
Yep.
Well, in that case, I think I am, at least as far as collaborating goes, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, maybe I'm a terror, but I think I'm pretty good at that, because I do also have a pretty good background in theater and working on a lot of other stuff besides game designs, where I'm involved with a lot of people, and Dungeons and Dragons kind of works on that too. So I think I'm okay with that skill at least, but it's good to keep in mind to not get into that headspace, because it does seem like a trap that you could fall into pretty easily if you weren't aware of it.
Yeah. Yep. Now, another place a lot of people tend to fail out in interviews, especially in those entry positions, is people who are, for lack of a better word, kind of self-obsessed, right? They only see through their own lens of experience, right? These are people who only want to make games that they like to play, or people who are just aren't able to empathize and think about what the experiences of other people playing their games is. And for example, a lot of that just comes down to understanding the way that other people experience games and game experiences. For example, Candy Crush is not a game that I play a lot. Certainly, that certainly doesn't make it a not a non-successful game. In fact, it's massively successful. It's more financially successful than any game I've ever worked on, right? And that's because the people who enjoy that type of experience and want them just to mix up kind of their day-to-day life with a couple bits of score and puzzle solving, right, really enjoy that type of content. And so your ability to be flexible in what you understand and to be able to understand its perspectives outside your own is one that I would say basically crosses the line between incredibly, assistant to associate or even junior designer, right?
Interesting. I see. I imagine that kind of skill is probably pretty transferable in a lot of careers, but I'm sure especially for creative people, because we can have a tendency to become very obsessed with our own ideas and not want to work on other people's. So,
yeah. Well, what's that famous quote? Finished is better than perfect, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I have a last thought. I don't know if this could cut in or not. Basically, it's the nature of...
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So the last one is the nature of advice, right? Here's the thing about advice, at least I learned. At least from the audience who are watching, I think when you give advice, a lot of times we're actually giving advice to our former selves, what we would do when we were young, because we understand our own context the best. So when we take advice, you look at the people who are very successful, they listen to everyone's advice, but they do it their own way, because you understand your context more than anyone's context. So all we're sharing is our thoughts, But whoever's watching this, it's for you to think about your context the best and how this applies to your context, right? That's just the last piece.
Yeah. Whereas, for example, for me, the best portfolio is a mechanics demonstration, right? It would be a total disaster for me to do a character design portfolio. Even though I might have the fundamental skills up here, I don't have the expression skills out there. Just as I can do a profit and loss statement for an organization, it wouldn't be as effective as if David had built one, right? And your own powers and skills will be expressed similarly.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Everybody has to apply it to themselves and make it work for their situation. So, if anybody is trying to get more information, questions that may not have been answered today, is there anywhere that they can find more videos from you guys, or a blog, like David was saying, that they can get more information from you?
Yeah, David, why don't you take this one?
Yes. So for us right now, we're actually just starting to produce content. So we're going to start sharing a blog post that Alex has written or is going to write. Also, we're going to start a YouTube channel where this podcast will be at. And in addition to other videos, we're going to start produce, and also our Instagram as well. All of it will be at. Right now, we don't have our YouTube channel set up yet, but for the Instagram, it'll be game design skills, plural, because we're going to update our domain to skills before it wasn't available. So at game design skills for Instagram, that'll be best right now. And
I'll go ahead and link all of that stuff in the description of this video too. So if anybody is looking for that information, I'll put it all down there. Everybody's blogs, Instagrams, YouTubes, everything.
We really, really want to make sure that we can reach out to people that are either just getting started in their game design journey and need more reinforcement because they didn't learn what they need to learn in college, or people who have been in the industry but feel like they're plateauing and know they're missing some fundamental. We're really looking to put together a wide variety of courses that will help people break out of their ruts and start to fix those fundamentals they may have overlooked, and teach them a few advanced techniques if they pay attention.
So different skill levels, stuff for everybody.
Yeah. Oh, in the meantime, and also if you want to look, Alex his personal blog also has a lot of very good information he has written, which is Xelnath, XELNATH.com. And you could also read some of the content there as well. Yeah.
Yep. And people want to just reach out to me or say, hey, can also just do @Xelnath on Twitter. And I usually respond to that within a day or two.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much. It was great talking to you, and I can't wait for our next episode.
Yeah, thank you for hosting, Ari. This was great.
My pleasure. I'll see you all next time.
See you guys.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Cheers.